Hello there, World of Tankers. Welcome to the channel. Hopefully all of you are doing well out there. I'm, of course, your host, Blitz, and in today's video, we are going to be going over some World War II history. Now, I guess this isn't really World War II because this is right after World War II ended, but we're going to be breaking into the FV4005 Stage II and the FV215B183 in World of Tanks Blitz, two very prominent and deadly Tier 10 British turreted tank destroyers. So, of course, if you enjoyed today's video, especially because you guys voted and decided that you wanted to see this video over versus videos and map tutorials, please let me know in the comments down below, and especially if you want to see more like this. I'll have more polls that you guys can vote and decide, so make sure to smash that subscribe button and click that bell notification icon so you are notified and informed when I do post my next poll, so that way you might be able to vote and decide what you want to see come out next on the channel. But we're going to be talking about some history in World of Tanks Blitz today. Now, I am going to be pulling up a replay that I just played. I was trying to talk over it, but I learned that trying to talk about something that actually requires brain cells, and as well while playing this game, which does require 1 or 2 brain cells, can be a little bit tricky at certain times. So first of all, the FV215B183 and the FV4005 Stage II, you'd probably notice, have very similar looking guns. In fact, if you line them up next to each other, you'd probably notice that both of the guns look exactly identical in the size, which is weird because in Blitz, the 4005 I think carries a 123mm gun. Yeah, kind of weird how they did the caliber on that gun, but in Blitz, it's a 123mm gun if I'm not mistaken. However, in real life, the funny thing is that the FV215B183 didn't actually exist. The way it worked is that the FV215, which is actually what the 183 was called at the time, was just a prototype design. Right after World War II, the IS-3 tank, which the Russians had made, of course we all know the Tier 8 Russian heavy tank, is an extremely influential tank during the end of World War II, and as well was just an excellent design, way ahead of pretty much any other, should I say, Allied forces, and as well the Axis, if you want to count them really in the war anymore. But pretty much, the IS-3 was a fantastic design, way ahead of any of its predecessors in the stages of right after World War II. So Britain came up with an idea, well, heck, we got to build a gun that is able to penetrate through, I think it was 160mm of sloped armor, which is quite a bit. So there were really no guns at the time capable of doing that, so Britain designed the 163mm gun. However, at the time, the 163mm Hess shells were not capable of, to what the British Army predicted, to destroy an IS-3. Now, the way they classified destroy wasn't as in to completely kill the crew. It wasn't to completely blow the vehicle's ammo rack off like in Blitz when you get that beautiful, lovely ammo rack, but the way they call it destroy or knock out or to kill was to immobilize the tank and pretty much render it useless on the battlefield. So if you shot a Hess shell and, let's say, destroyed the tracks of the vehicle, well, that would count as rendered useless or killed because it can't do anything. It can't really, you're not going to get out of your tank in the middle of war. Yeah, not necessarily the best idea. And oof, that Hess shell there, that was a really, really lucky one that managed to come out. 183 does not do that too often. But pretty much, the 183mm design was come up with, I think it was by Vickers Armstrong. Now, if you've heard the name Vickers before, not only do you get the name from the Tier 10 and Tier 9 light tank, which wasn't actually a real vehicle, believe it or not. Wargaming did not actually get any idea whatsoever. I think they made those vehicles up themselves, the Vickers Cruiser and the Vickers Light. But Vickers Armstrong was an actual company, who I think was named after Vickers Armstrong, the guy who created it. And pretty much they developed not only the Valentine, the Tier 4, I think it is, light tank, but as well some other of the Vickers Light, all the way down at Tier 2 and 3, which is pretty cool. Very early war tanks. So they took on the idea of building the 183mm armament that the FV215B, which was the first design, was going to be able to carry. Now, the FV215, which was the hull, was also the same type of hull you would have seen the Conqueror have, which, if you take a close look, you would notice that they're very, very, well, actually, I don't own the Conqueror. That's a bit of a shame. I was going to pull it out. But if you take a look at the Conqueror hull, you notice they're very, very similar designs. And pretty much, it was going to be that the 183 chassis is the Conqueror chassis, and they were just going to slide the turret back. That way they could even out the weight distribution. However, after a lot of prototypes, pretty much what happened was the project went into limbo, and they couldn't do much with it. So then they tried testing it on the FV4 or the 4005 chassis, which would be the Conway, and then moving on to, as you can see here, the FV4005. Now, if you don't know, the FV4005 is just a Centurion chassis. If you take a look, or if you didn't know that, you can pretty much take a look now and you can see that it's pretty much just a Centurion chassis with a massive turret mounted on it. So what happened was, after they'd figured out that the Hess shells on this vehicle were capable of doing menacing things, they pretty much mounted a first prototype turret, which I'll flash on your screen here now. And with that first prototype, it was pretty dang menacing. They not only shot it at a Conqueror, which with the second shell is able to split the Conqueror's turret in half, but as well they tested it against another, I think it was a Centurion tank, and it literally blew the turret of the Centurion off with a standard shell. Now that is crazy, blowing the turret off of a vehicle and destroying the mantlet of a tier 10 heavy, or not tier 10 heavy, but a tier 9 heavy tank, which it is the Conqueror in World of Tanks Blitz. Imagine destroying the mantlet of a vehicle with the sheer weight and firepower of a shell. Well, that's what the 4005 Stage II, I think it was capable of doing. It's either the Stage 2 or the Stage 3. There's so many different stages they had during the war. But it's just crazy to me that this gun was actually a real prototype. In fact, if you go to the Bovington Tank Museum, which is where Tank Fest is held, Wargaming goes to every single year. Sadly, COVID has changed that. You can actually look at this vehicle in real life statures. Now, the size of a 183mm shell is about 6 feet tall, which, when you think of it, is massive. Like, this tank is already massive, but to think that a 6-foot shell is coming out of a vehicle and flying at your tank, yeah, that's pretty dang deadly. Now, the 4005 was never actually brought in past prototype stages. They made a couple, I think they made 2 or 3, and they tested them, but pretty much they realized that this tank was very, as you can see, just not really an adequate vehicle to use in the war. The FV205 hull was stopped because it actually was meant to be a fully traversable turret, but as you can see in Blitz, it couldn't fully traverse because it was so heavy that on any angled terrain, just like the KV2, it actually couldn't turn because it was worried that it would blow the gun and the entire turret off the vehicle. So the 4005 was the next mounting, and while this vehicle actually did have a lot of good and successful attempts, there were still a lot of issues. It couldn't go very far on fuel. The turret was once again very, very large. The tank's camouflage was poor, and yeah, an IS-3 they pretty much projected would easily cut right through this thing's turret, blow not only through the front but through the back. And if an IS-3 just realized, oh look, we're being aimed at by a 4005, well, they would load an HE shell and every single person inside the tank would be dead. So not necessarily the best of designs, and they stopped doing the prototypes as they built more faster tanks and more heavily armored vehicles like the Chieftain Mark VI, which we all know and love, although that's a way, way later designed tank. Pretty much Britain didn't design many vehicles during that time. I guess the Tortoise was designed, but again, the Tortoise as well, if you don't know, are actually real tanks. They are sitting currently in garage, if I know that. They were meant to be used right after World War II, or during the later stages of World War II, but the war ended before these tanks actually saw service, and they were pretty cool tanks. The guns were able to penetrate pretty much any Axis powers, and yeah, the Tortoise would have been a very, very cool vehicle. But the fun fact I wanted to point out in today's video was that actually it's the other way around. The 4005 actually carried the FV205B 183's 183mm armament, which is kind of weird because in Blitz, as I said, I think this carries a 123mm. There you go. So this in Blitz actually is not true at what it was whatsoever in real life. And as well, if this gun was actually what it was in real life, well, pretty much you can aim at any tier 10 vehicle in the game, probably even a mouse, shoot it, and just absolutely demolish it, slapping that turret off, maybe if you hit near the ammo rack. The Hess shells on this tank were immensely strong for the time period. And sadly, while we never got to see this tank actually see any action, because that would have been really, really cool, it's still amazing to see the feat of the British Empire and what they were able to build during the later stages of, it's not really later stages of World War II, but what they were building after World War II and sort of the Cold War. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you like this type of video, if you want to see more like this, because this is something that's really cool to me, and it fascinates me that massive, massive tank designs like this could be built and were actually real. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. But other than that, hopefully all of you are doing well out there, and I will be seeing you in the next one.